We've already seen the select statement in action, so let's skip that one for now and we'll focus on the next statement down, the insert statement. First of all, I'm just going to comment out what we have here. Oops. There we go. And we'll take the scenario that we want to insert a brand new record into our Z employees table. So in its simplest form, what we would do is write insert followed by our table name with a full stop at the end. As you can see, this is super simple. But one little thing to note is if you use this form of the statement, you always must specify the table name. You cannot use a variable instead. Now next, as I mentioned, get into the habit of checking sy sub rc. And I've just noticed I made a mistake. It's sy dash sub rc. So once we have our insert statement, then you would write some sort of check statement if sy sub rc not equals 0, or it can just be 0. Then we would do some statement. So that will ensure we capture any errors that happen with the insert statement, and we can take the appropriate action by including some code right here. Now let's step back just a little bit and go through this statement again in a little more detail. And the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to use this form of the statement. It includes some bad practices by today's standards and is a throwback to some of the older ABAP programs that you will no doubt come across when working with an SAP system. So what do I mean? Well, take a look at the statement again. All it says is insert table name, insert Z employees. You might wonder, what are we actually inserting? Well, this is where we need to introduce a concept called a work area. And the ABAP statement we have just written expects a work area to exist that was created when we declared an internal table. And this type of work area is often referred to as a header record. So let me bring in Microsoft Excel to try and explain a header record and how it's attached to an internal table, and compare it against a standalone work area. Okay, so I'm going to try and represent a normal table here. What we would normally have is record 1, and we would have field 1, field 2, field 3, etc. Then we would have record 2, record 3, record 4, record 5. And they would all contain their individual fields. So we would have an entry for field 1, for field 2, for field 3 in every record. Now, if this is our table, let's give it a nice border. Then when we work with an internal table with a header record, we have this additional record up here. And this little guy is what gets populated when we reference the table just by its table name. Or in our case, where we chose the insert. So what would happen is whatever was existing on this header record, when the insert is executed, this record would be inserted into the table body. This header record only exists in memory whilst our program is being executed. It doesn't contain a record held in the table itself. It's just a place for us to work with a current record. And that's where the term work area comes from. We just use it to hold the current record we are working with. So, when we are working with the data in our program, we're always referencing this header record just by using the table name. And it can become a little bit confusing because you think you're referencing the table, but actually no, you're working with a record held in memory that has the same structure as the table. The fact that the table and its header line have the same name leads to confusion. Now, with the introduction of ABAP objects, which we don't cover in this course, but I highly recommend you take a course covering ABAP objects, this method of using this type of work area is no longer valid. ABAP objects will not allow you to reference a table by using its header record. So like I say, this is a bit of a throwback to how ABAP was coded many years ago. And with the changes in the language that have come about over the last, I was going to say few years, but boy, it must be 6 years, 7 years. This way of referencing a work area for a table is no longer used. And you shouldn't create programs yourself using this type of work area. So to avoid any confusion when working with internal tables, you should make sure your programs work with separate work areas. And what do I mean by this? Well, it is similar in a way to what we have here. Let me pop it down here. If I do an insert, so this example is a table with a header record. This one is an internal table without header record, but we have a separately defined work area. We'll call this WA. And this is our table. So when we write code, we can reference the table by itself, and when we reference the work area where we want to work with a record in memory, we reference a completely separate work area. It will have its own name, so it will be clear that it does not belong to the table exclusively. It's a separate structure that we will create in our program that sits by itself. So let's go back to our program code and have a look at how we can declare a work area. So you should be familiar with the data statement, and that's exactly what we do to declare a work area, because in reality, it's just like a normal structure. All we do is data, and we'll give it a name. Let's say WA employees. Then we need to give it a type. Well, remember we're working with a table, so I'm not going to use the type statement and declare, a character field. I'm going to declare a bunch of fields that make up the table. And the easiest way of doing this is use the like statement. And we're going to say our WA employees work area is like Z employees, which is our table. So our WA employees work area will take the same structure as our Z employees table. But it won't be a table as such. It will be a record structure, not a table structure. So our work area will only store one record. So once we declare our WA employees work area, we can then change our insert statement to use the work area to insert a record into the table. And we do this by editing the insert statement. Instead of saying insert Z employees, we will say insert Z employees from WA employees, which is our work area. It would help if I could type. Here we go. Now also, with this form of the statement, we could actually use a variable here to identify the table. So instead of doing insert table name, we can do insert and put a variable there that we may have populated earlier with our Z employees table. And the only thing to remember is if you do use a variable, you have to enclose it in brackets. So our insert statement would look like this. Insert our table name in brackets. I'll remove that for now and we'll concentrate on the basic form. So now we've declared our work area, we've got an insert statement. One thing I need to do fill our work area with some data. So to do that in this example, I'm going to remind myself of the structure of Z employees. I could use forward navigation, just double click, but I'm just going to open up a brand new session. And I'm going to copy these fields. Paste them in. Remember, copy and paste is a coder's best friend. Oops. So what we would do is fill our work area with a new record, and I'm just going to check what data we have in the table first. Forward navigation this time. Okay, we have used up to 1, 0, then 5. So let's fill in a record. Six. Tell you what, let's give it a proper surname. Whoever Westmore is. Bruce. No, he wasn't born in 2000. Let's say 1992. 12, 13. So now we have our data statement declaring our work area. We are filling our work area fields with some values. We're then going to insert our work area field into our table and check that everything works successfully. And for this check, let's have a write statement. We'll change this to an equals. So if it does equal 0, write this statement out. Else, we have a return code of sy sub rc, and don't forget to use the chain statement. Let's make sure everything looks good. Give it a check, and then we should be able to execute our program.